Who, me? Excited about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? What on earth would give you that idea? So the third installment of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise has hit cinemas, and it is James Gunn's last foray into this franchise with Marvel before he switches over to Warner Brothers DC, helming their new DC cinematic universe. But is this installment worth the hype? Let's get into it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the third and quite possibly final installment of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise in the Marvel Cinematic Universe after a huge debacle that happened a few years ago with James Gunn being fired and then rehired by Disney and Marvel to complete his trilogy that he envisioned from the start. He is now switching over from Marvel to DC. Not before he gets to do his final Guardians movie that he envisioned doing right from the start. And honestly, I do feel like if this had been in the hands of anyone other than James Gunn, I don't think it would have had quite the same tone to it. I feel like anyone else would have done a Marvel play-by-numbers film that ties it all in with everything else that's happening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And something that I quite like about the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise is that it is actually a very separate entity from everything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's not really a lot that deliberately ties into every other film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe like a lot of the other ones tend to do. Now, I'm going to keep this review relatively spoiler-free because I don't want to touch on too many major plot points. There are some things that happen during the film that it's better to have your own opinion formed on rather than having someone tell you about the major plot points and then go, oh yeah, I knew about this happening. So a lot of this review will be saved for a spoiler review that will come out at a later time. But with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the rundown of the plot is that one of their own kind of gets into a little bit of trouble, and it's a rescue mission to save their life, and there are other characters that get involved. Essentially, it kind of rabbit holes and spirals from that point on. And because of the race against time to save a life of one of their own, it does take on a very much darker tone than some of the others. When you're looking at a film that is literally dealing with a subject of trauma and PTSD, it is hard to work in comedy into that kind of a storyline. However, by way of the characters being what they are, they do still manage to achieve the dynamic that we have come to know and love about the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. Now, obviously, after the events of Avengers Endgame, we do get a different Gamora in this version of Guardians of the Galaxy. So she is not the same Gamora as we had in the previous two, and that is very much touched upon at points in this film. There's one bit of exposition about halfway through the film where if you weren't caught up with what Gamora had happened to her, then it's very much explained. I do feel like, in a way, it's better that we have this version of Gamora because the whole first two films were very much will they, won't they between Star-Lord and Gamora, and they took away that aspect with Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and now we get a different Gamora, and it's not so much focused on the will they, won't they, because it's a very different dynamic, because it's a very different Gamora. And I did like that there was that aspect in this film, because it makes her a different character. So they have to struggle to find this, like, new dynamic that's going on, and that adds a whole different element. Now, does that also mean that there are quite a few plates being spun, because there's the main plot line, and then there's the new Gamora dynamic, and then there's a couple of other characters that they need to focus on, and then there's the bad guy as well? Does that mean that there's too many plates being spun? Maybe, but it doesn't at any point drop any of those plates. It just means that some plates start to wobble because they're not being focused on. But I do have to say that the bad guy, or the main bad guy of this film, because I feel like for the most part there are maybe one or two different bad guys, but the main antagonist of the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the High Evolutionary, who is a character that is synonymous with the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise from comic books lore, but has not really at all been hinted at or spoken about in any capacity before this point. But that being said, I actually feel like the High Evolutionary makes for a really interesting villain of the piece. His motivations and drive for this film are very much kind of egotistical, and I kind of like that in a bad guy, that there's just absolutely blinkers on, tunnel vision set on what they want to achieve, and morals and other people's opinions and what happens around them, that just isn't part of the question. They're just solely focused on achieving one particular thing. This line that he has towards the end that sums up his drive is a Thanos-level quote, if ever I heard one. And I came out from this film genuinely thinking, like, the High Evolutionary is probably a better Kang than Kang was in the Ant-Man film. He would genuinely be an Avengers-level threat. Now, obviously, the Guardians of the Galaxy are still, like, the space-bound adventuring band of misfits, and considering that a lot of other Marvel Cinematic films have tried to achieve the same thing as Guardians of the Galaxy, being a band of misfits on a space adventure recently, I still feel like Guardians of the Galaxy achieved that better than any other installment in the franchise, because I feel like a lot of them are trying to do that since Endgame opened it out on a cosmic level. But Guardians are still top of the list for me for space adventures with a band of misfits, because that's just what they encapsulate the best. Their dynamic does it better than anyone else, and no one does it better than James Gunn, which is why he had to come back to do this third one. Anyone else just wouldn't have done it right. Overall, though, I do feel like this is one of the best, if not the best, installment into the Marvel Cinematic Universe since films like Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm gonna maybe say Shang-Chi, because I really, really liked Shang-Chi. I think I like Shang-Chi more than a lot of other people did. But Shang-Chi still up there for me. But I do feel like this is the best installment into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, potentially since Avengers Endgame. So with that in mind, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 gets a solid 4.5 stars from me. I feel like the only thing that would have maybe brought it up to a full 5 stars was the fact that the runtime on this was quite long. There were 1 or 2 slow moments, and there were 1 or 2 focus pulls from other characters that I will go into in my spoiler review that meant the pacing just got lost a little bit along the way. The comedy is still there, the dynamics are still there, and the love is still there, and I loved that about this film. And I feel like this could well be one of the top trilogies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, along with Captain America and Spider-Man. This is a solid trilogy. And also, a worthy point of note is that this film does include the Marvel Cinematic Universe's first ever F-bomb. And what a way for James Gunn to go out from the company, leaving us with the first F-bomb in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So keep an eye out for that. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Who's your favourite Guardian from the bunch? And what would you like to see happen if there were new iterations of the Guardians of the Galaxy from this point onwards? Personally, I do feel like a new Guardians team might be in order, and maybe Rocket and Groot should get their own spin-off series. All comments are welcome in the comment section below. Let's talk nerdy. As always, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here and you would like to see some more, you can click right here to see some more funky, fresh videos from yours truly. And until that point, yes, I did splash out and get the promo cup. Of course I did. It's Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe I'm biased in my opinion. I don't care.